Hi, I wanted to capture a couple of things I talked about as far as how I warm up some of the knee meniscus and the lateral knee strengthenings, off-angle lateral knee strengthenings. The first thing I do, within one of the first warrior ones I may do in a class, I would draw back my weight, turn out at the ankle, and try to try to stimulate the meniscus underneath the kneecap. Pull back center forward, and pull back inwards. Simple but effective little triggering of some awareness at the lateral knee movement. So that's the first building step of doing some other stuff with the knees. So again, during your first warrior one or something, just come out of it, transfer the weight, draw into the knee, and just, again, focus on the knee, not the hip. Pivot out, forward, inward, and go back and do whatever you're going to do in your warrior one. So that's the first thing I talked about. Second thing is, it's a non-yogic move, but it's been very helpful to my clients who are trying to build up knee strength, lateral knee strength. It's called a dipping grapevine. So basically, take small steps and just dip, small side-to-side movements, dip, focusing on the transfer off the foot edge to the rest of the foot, transferring to the knee. So I usually get the students to step back behind me and follow along with the dipping grapevines. Very, very helpful to strengthen the lateral off-angle knee. So dipping grapevines. Make sure they don't deflect at the tailbone. Make sure they do it slow, consciously working the knees. So dipping grapevines. So the next thing I mentioned was later on in the practice, towards the end most of the time, if I'm in a seated position, I'll switch this down a little bit. If I'm in a seated position, what I would do is I've already done a strong vinyasa practice or got everything warmed up. I would basically just get them playing with the knee maybe, coupling. But the thing that I've added to this is to bring the opposite hand side across the top, plant the same side hand as a foundation. Bring the heel slightly towards your armpit by bending at the elbow, then using your right arm to provide resistance training at off angles while you go up and away. Back to the armpit, up and away slowly. Now if they can't reach their outside foot edge, you let them hold the ankle, let them hold anywhere. Do what you can do. Maybe switch to a strap hold. You can use a strap here too. So just basically do this little resistance training. So left hand is strong, resistance training. So that's what I mean by off-angle strengthening. So again, play with it. Hand over the top. Other hand is provide your foundation. Heel towards your armpit, elbow bent, slowly straighten, draw back. Slowly straighten, draw back. Straighten, draw back. Great for soccer players. Anybody who's doing off-angle cutting moves. Okay, so that's what I mean by off-angle resistance. So in that same vein, if I'm laying on my back, I've already done a standard strap series where we're going out and going up and going over and whatever. I tend to go ahead and take a strap and same move, but in a free state with your hips. Basically stretch first. This left arm off the side can play at different angles. So realize that. This can play at different angles. So you go up and back. Play with the tension, delicately, playfully. Heel goes down into the thigh, ankle flexion occurring at the extension. Two-handed, off angles. So play with that. This is the more in-depth rehabilitation of that knee if needed. And reversed. Crossbody, everything I do is always crossbody. So this is what I mean by strengthening. Got to work your students very slowly. They'll feel it the next day, so emphasize slowly, delicately. No pulling, it's just resistance. Off angles, you can change this angle here. Not too much off to the side. You do two-handed. Okay, so that should be helpful. Those are the 4 things I mentioned. But another thing I wanted to mention was, in my choreography of my classes, realize that I never ever do what I call a loaded hip knee manipulation at the start of class. What I mean by that is I've never start seated and say, okay, well, let's work our knees today, and start doing this. To me, this is contrary, because you've already contracted at the pelvis, you've locked up the femur head into the socket. So if you're tempted to do this at the start of class, just simply change it into a laying on your back and manipulating it. At least the hip is free, the femur head's free to move around within the hip socket. So that's one thing I never do. I never do what I call fixed hip knee manipulations. I'm also from the school of thought in yoga where you always displace at the hip to protect the knee. Unless you have hip problems or hip issues or osteoporosis, brittle bones or something. But I've always been a firm believer in going to the other buddy cheek, drawing the femur head slightly out of the socket, then making the outwards turn at the knee and dropping it down. That isolates the knee away from the rotation. Because remember, knees are hinges. They're not meant to torque. So I'm a firm believer in displace at the hip, make the turn, release the knee down. So that's a great way to do that. So what else? In yoga in general, in choreography, add all kinds of little other knee things that I just was thinking about. I do in side angle, I would add a little external rotation at the knee. In side angle, nice little thing to add on once in a while. So keep that in mind too. One other thing that I also am aware of in my yoga teachings is that when I have my students transfer direction on a mat, I never ball pivot. I always train heel pivoting. Always train heel pivoting. Takes the torque away from the knees. A lot of teachers aren't conscious enough to build that into the teachings. Heel pivot, heel pivot, heel pivot. Can't say it enough. Okay? And the biggest thing also on knees is that I say it so many times in so many different ways. If you are doing lots of seated stuff, plump the pillows, fluff the feathers, move the mud flaps, whatever you want to call it. Release the glutes if you're going to do anything, because that'll free up some of the knee issues too. Okay, so think about those things. Anyways, hope that helps. And thank you. Thanks for getting me to think about how I work my knees into my practices more too. Thank you.